I try to sort of say, no, there is authentic evidence that says that this is not allowed. And when I mentioned that, her response was something like, well, we are more laid back than you guys, pointing at me. And again, it implied that there was huge differences between her Islam and my Islam, like that perhaps maybe I am a bit extreme. Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam, ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, sister, how are you?
Alaikum salam. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Just before we get into today's topic, I just wanted to see, if it's okay, you don't need to, no pressure, but I just wanted to ask you how your first Ramadan went. You might summarise that a wee bit, your Eid experience.
My first Ramadan, like all things considered, was really well, and I feel like I'm proud of myself for how I done, like especially being someone who hadn't fasted a whole lot before. I did take your advice and I did do like some Monday and Thursdays, not all of them, but just a few to like prepare myself. So I think like the first like week, I would say, I was so tired, like I would nap, like it was really, really difficult. And then gradually as time went on, I found it got easier and easier. And it felt good to fast. Like, I feel like a lot of people have this misconception that, oh, like Muslims are going to be so hungry all day and it's going to be like so hard. But actually, once you get over that, once your body gets used to it, like, I just felt great, and the closeness you feel to Allah and everything just is like, it's just truly wonderful. And I actually think that it gave my body like the refresh it needed, because like it like made me have like a healthy appetite, whereas I think we all get used to like overindulging and eating loads of junk food and stuff, not all the time, but like maybe more often than we should. And I think it just was a good like time to just refresh and kind of like get yourself into a healthier mindset to continue after Ramadan. And Eid was great. Eid was really good. It was different for me, but I think knowing how many more Ramadans and Eids I'm going to have, inshallah, it's set me up really well for it. It's made me excited for the next one.
Yeah, because just to clarify, you spent it yourself.
Yeah, I spent it myself. So it was definitely maybe a bit more lonely than like other people would feel when they celebrate Eid. But I think all things considered, having spent it myself, it was a really nice one.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I'm also so proud of you. I'm not trying to make you shy, but honestly, your mentality and how you approach your practice is so refreshing. It really gives me, myself, a wee boost. And it couldn't have been easy spending Ramadan alone, but you did it with grace and dignity. Alhamdulillah, you looked after yourself. And you're right, absolutely. Inshallah, you'll get to practice many more. It is a learning experience, it does make you appreciate the time that you do spend it with people. So we take everything in our stride as Muslims, don't we? We have a goal and a purpose today, right? And I'm going to give a little bit of context for the people who may watch this. So during Ramadan, we had the opportunity to meet up, alhamdulillah. We attended a reverse Iftar. It was very pleasant, lovely sisters there, great food. But we did run into a little bit of a situation that could be confusing, to say the least. And I did promise on that day that I would get into it when the Halaqa is returned, and that's why we're here today. So, yeah, let's just get straight into it. So, this isn't what I would normally focus on as a new Muslim, and I wouldn't advise anybody to dive straight into this topic. A heart surgeon, when teaching his students, wouldn't go straight into heart surgery. There's a process to learning. Maybe they would learn about surgical instruments first, or learn about safety procedures first, like that, and anything else. There's a process to your learning. So you start off with the basics, you start off with the fundamentals, and then you work your way up. So this is a little bit of a jump, but we're doing it for a purpose, inshallah. Normally for new Muslims, we would focus on Tawheed, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on with the Aberdeen sisters, inshallah, getting to know Allah and building that connection with Allah. However, because of the current climate, because of what we experienced, and you also do see it online as well. Because of this, I wanted to address it just to clarify, give you an understanding of why these things happen and to avoid confusion, inshallah. So, for context, I'm going to get into the story, but I'm only going to get into the details so much because I don't want to spread the misinformation that was said to us on that day. To summarise, a sister that I know, Ish, I crossed paths with her a few times. Lovely sister. She is very nice. We all sat at the same table. We had other reverts at that table. My daughter was at that table. The there was even someone who hadn't even finished learning Salah yet at the table. So I just want to point out that there was new Muslims there as well. Then all of a sudden, when we were speaking to the sister, she spoke about doing something that is well known to be impermissible in Islam. So because of this, I was a bit shocked. And I never really, I don't know, my perception, you might be able to correct me because you were there, but I was a bit shocked and I never really knew how to address it. I tried to sort of say, no, there is authentic evidence that says that this is not allowed. And when I mentioned that, her response was something like, well, I follow this madhab and it's permissible here. And I'm not going to mention which madhab it is because it's irrelevant. And then she began to mention other acts that are well known to be impermissible, which left me in even more shock. And then she concluded by saying something like, well, we are more laid back than you guys, pointing at me. And again, I don't think she did it intentionally, but it implied that there was huge differences between her Islam and my Islam, you know, like that perhaps maybe I am a bit extreme. I don't know, have I done that justice? You let me know.
Absolutely, because I was just as surprised as you, because it is things that are well known to be impermissible. And it did kind of highlight differences between the people who follow Islam and the differences of opinion. And obviously just the worry is that revert so listen to they believe that they are permissible.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night. I spoke to you about it. I couldn't sleep at night. I sent you over the evidence to make sure that because I felt like I was responsible for you, you know. So I was like, wait, I need to get this evidence. I need to send it over. I couldn't sleep because I did have that sort of gira, we call it. So it's a protectiveness of ensuring that the religion is preserved and what you are getting, the information that you guys are getting is true and authentic, you know. She did mention that she studied the fiqh of one particular madhab, and this was the madhab she was claiming that said this, because she was tired of people telling her different things. This was the reason why she studied this one madhab, and it was more like, you know, I've studied this madhab, so that's it, class, you know, I've done my part, which I don't even think that's a beneficial mentality. But let's get into the topic now. Okay, so what is a madhab? A madhab, or the plural is called Madahib. It's a school of thought. Schools of thought are there to help Muslims practice and implement Islam. Again, I'm going to scrape the surface. This is a whole study area in itself, okay? So, for example, last Halaqa, we went over the fiqh of fasting. Yeah? So, fiqh linguistically means an understanding, but the technical term means the practical implementation. So the fiqh of fasting means the practical implementation of fasting. Where do we, and I'm asking you this question, where do we get our guidance from? Where do we learn from?
The Quran and hadiths.
Yeah, so the Quran and the Sunnah, the authentic hadiths, exactly. Now the Quran is the words of Allah. They are perfect. They hold no mistakes. They're not creation. They're not the words of the Prophet ﷺ, sheikhs or scholars. Okay. The Sunnah, which you'll hear very often, can be used in different contexts and different subjects of study. So the first one, the Sunnah can be when people are referring to the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, what he said and what he approved. When people say follow the Quran and Sunnah, what they mean is they're following Allah and they're following the way of the Prophet, the actions of the Prophet, what he said and what he approved. When we're talking about the Sunnah in context of fiqh or rulings, it means that we're talking about what's mustahab. Okay, and I'm going to get into that in a second. Mustahab is one of the 5 principles of Islamic law. These are terms that you will hear when people are talking about rulings, when people are talking about fiqh of praying, fiqh of fasting, fiqh of doing wudu, or, you know, all these different things. So it's how to practically implement all these things. The first one is fard and wajib.
Wait, fard is one, wajib is the second, or are they together as one?
So it's one principle, but they are 2 separate terminologies. So fard is based on definitive evidence. Wajib is based on ambiguous evidence. But what is fard and what is wajib are obligations. So it means that you're rewarded if you do them, and if you neglect them, you are sinful. So this is fard and wajib. Mustahab, the one I just mentioned before, is recommended. So there's no punishment for not doing them, but you are rewarded if you do them. Sometimes you'll hear people say, the sunnah prayers. So these are the prayers that are recommended, that are the Prophet ﷺ would do, the Sahaba would do, but they're not mandatory. They're not like the 5 prayers. The third terminology is called makruh.
And that's disliked, isn't it?
It is, mashallah, yeah. So there's no punishment if you do it, but if you leave it for the sake of Allah, you'll be rewarded. The next one is called mubah, and that's neutral, so no punishment, no reward. And the last one is haram, so forbidden, which I'm sure you've heard of. Punishment for doing these acts and reward for abandoning them, inshallah. So all actions will fall under these categories, and knowing what different actions fall under is for our benefit. We benefit, like you just said, we've just came out of a month of fasting, and there were so many benefits that we get from that. We get spiritual benefits, we connect with Allah, we get physical benefits, like health-wise. Like I felt great after a month of fasting, because like you said, I stopped eating all the rubbish and just consumed what I needed to in order to maintain good health. And then the mental benefits as well. Me getting into a routine, me being organised, it's so good for my mentality, and that's another thing that Ramadan brings. So I'm just using this as an example, but there's so many benefits to sticking to the rules, Allah doesn't tell us to stay away from things that are good for us. Allah tells us to stay away from things that are bad for us. For us, He doesn't gain or lose anything by our obedience or us straying. It's us that benefits, us that lose. So I just wanted to put that out there. So how these things are determined, what is haram, what is fard, what is mubah, etc. It all is determined through adila, so through evidence. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, if anybody wanted to know anything like a ruling, who do you think they would ask?
The Prophet.
The Prophet ﷺ. In the time of the Sahaba, people would ask the Sahaba, they would ask Khalifa, so the ruler or the leader at that time. But Islam began to spread. So the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, they began to pass away, and life developed, knowledge spread. Leaders at that time, the scholars of that time, they recognised a need for a system that helped Muslims practice their religion. As the nation grew, as knowledge spread, they realised that they needed to collect the evidence. Madhhab means path. They were a path towards accessing, learning, and implementing Islam in the way of the Quran and Sunnah. However, because this day and age had no Google, had no phones, had no modern day technology, had no mass sharing abilities, not everyone had all the evidences at one time, but maybe in one area they had more evidence of a particular topic, or maybe more clarity could be found in another area. Knowledge was spreading far and wide, and as a result, people of knowledge and guidance emerged, including 4 main imams, but there's others. They're also known as the 4 Madhhabs. May Allah have mercy on them all. Now, some scholars would give their understanding of rulings based on the evidence that they had access to at the time. They would base their rulings based on the evidence that they had at the time. But the important principle that we have to keep in mind, and that they themselves, when you study them, when you study their lives and how they went about teaching and collecting and all this, they themselves were an example that the evidence takes precedence, and this is where we see people lacking today, right? So if another scholar was to have access to a stronger evidence that perhaps gave more clarity to an evidence they had, or more context to evidence they had, they would give that the priority. The science of grading hadith is one of my favourite topics, and it's built on transparency, and they collect not only the strong stuff, but they collect the weak stuff, like total transparency. It's lovely. The students of these scholars I mentioned, and the teachers, they would come together in transparency to locate the truth. So there was no ego. I can't say this to my teacher because of this, that everybody's focus was finding and locating the truth, the way of the Quran and the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So all madhabs were united in that our loyalty lies with the Quran and Sunnah. If evidence was found to overwrite what they knew and had access to, it would take priority and happily. Therefore, when it comes to the situation that we found ourselves in that event, the sister, she followed one particular madhab, which in itself is not wrong. okay? Because all of the four madhabs were respected and appreciated. Like, we love and respect them all because they were a part of a people who sacrificed their lives to ensure that we received the knowledge. People sacrificed their lives so we could be reading it and talking about it today, you know. However, going back to our story, the sister spoke about a topic where there is clear, authentic evidence. So this evidence should have took priority. It wouldn't have compromised her being upon that madhab, but it just meant because the evidence was presented to her that, you know, she should have took it. To say I'm just following this madhab irrelevant of the evidence is not the way it works. Our goal is what's pleasing to Allah, the right and wrong. The madhab is not the goal. It is not where we settle. It's not where we stop. It's merely the path towards the Quran and Sunnah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Unfortunately, some people do use a madhab as a loophole to be able to do things according to their desires. Some people also use it to cause division. Some people use it as a crutch or as an excuse not to increase their knowledge. You know, they're just like, oh, you know, this is what this madhab says, I'm good. You know, like, there's no real, is it true? Is it authentic? Where can we find that? Where can we see that? Nothing goes above the Quran. First and foremost, if something is in the Quran that's clear cut, then nothing anybody can say can go above it. There is a science with the Sunnah that is really thorough, really unique, honestly, really unique. No other historical science of preservation can compare. So beautiful, and inshallah, would love to get into that one day with you. I remember I was learning, and there was one thing, I can't remember what it was, but it was just like, I was like, wow, they literally thought of everything, of every little area. Just amazing. I was so excited.
Yeah, I'd love to go through that because I have no idea, like, how the hadiths were recorded. I genuinely have no knowledge on that, so it'd be great to dive in.
Well, a lot of people don't, and I think that's a huge part of the problem. That's just what I see personally. I think if you know the science of grading hadith, if you know how a thing becomes sahih and how a thing is considered weak and why we should follow the sahih and not the weak and all the other details, you get security and surety in your practice. Not just doing it because somebody said so, you're doing it because you understand the system.
Half the battle is actually understanding why, because then if someone comes back with something, at least you know and you can explain how it actually works.
The last thing I wanted to say, is it mandatory for a person to follow a madhab? No, it's not. It's not mandatory at all for anyone to follow one particular madhab. Rather, we should strive to learn the truth. What's advised today is that if you have a question on a particular area, let's say Ramadan or fasting, the advice is to go to a trustworthy scholar, people who are experts on the area, who have read and memorized even the compilations. Like my shaykh, I remember we were studying for a book, and I realised after the first couple of sessions that he wasn't looking at a book. So not only was I going through this really intense, thick book of hadith, but he had memorised the hadith, but he had also memorised the order of the book.
Oh, mashallah.
It really is amazing. So these are the people that we go to in this day. If you're a student of knowledge, if you're studying, then you might want to study a madhab. There is benefit, but to sort of constrict yourself, though, that's where the problem lies, because what a believer must do is follow the truth and what is correct, regardless of who says it. And this just makes sense. It makes sense, no?
I totally agree.
So that's pretty much it for today, because I didn't want to give you too much information. Do you feel better in terms of what happened? Like, does it clarify some of the things I couldn't clarify in the moment?
Yeah, it does, because obviously the initial thing that was spoken about at the table, I mean, I think it was clear, but it was clear for me and it was clear for you that these things aren't permissible. And obviously you had sent me through the hadiths and everything that had been said about it, but it's good to then understand where her thought process came from and learn more about that, because I think if you have an understanding as to where it came from, then maybe other things that are maybe said that might be impermissible, you can think, oh well, okay, it's just that.
Exactly. And the more you get to know the sort of systems of Islamic law, the grading of hadith, the more you get to know these things, the more you become, again, sure in what you're learning. You start to understand the logic. You know, alhamdulillah, this is why I get sort of frustrated. I became Muslim because I wanted the truth. I wanted to be the best version of myself. I didn't become Muslim so I could find ways out of things.
Absolutely.
In regards to these topics, it is a whole study area in itself that would take more than an hour. So please keep that in mind. Allah knows best, and may Allah make it easy for us to learn and to follow and to understand His beautiful religion. Ameen. Any mistakes that I've made in this halaqa or in this video are from me and my limitations and my need for knowledge, and any good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruk wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.